Seems to be live. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And welcome everyone to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Nikos Souslous. I'm the chair of the committee. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping points. The meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel, and all of those participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm does sound, please leave the meeting calmly by the nearest exit, which is through the doors on the right and out the main entrance, and we'll assemble on Blacks Road. There are toilets at the back of the room on my right, and also if someone is speaking, officers or members of the public, if you could introduce yourselves before speaking for the first time, and we'll also make sure that you're using the microphone. We move to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Lydia Painter and Councillor Nicole Trehi. And item number 2, declaration of interests. Are there any declarations of interest from any members? No. Very good. Thank you very much. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June 2025. Are the minutes of the previous meeting agreed? Agreed. Perfect. Thank you. Which brings us to item number 4, which is 12 Wellesley Avenue at W6 OUP. Can the presenting officer, Anissa Aboud, please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The next item on the agenda is 12 Wellesley Avenue, London W6 0UP. Your attention is drawn to the addendum, which contains a number of corrections. More specifically, a new wastewater heat recovery system condition has been added, and a cycle parking condition has been added, including update drawing number in condition 2, which has been corrected. The proposal seeks planning permission for the demolition of an existing car repair workshop, B8, B2 use class, erection of Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3-storey building comprising of ground, first, and second floor levels in connection with the creation of 3 single-family dwelling houses to the northern elevation of the site and the erection of a single-storey detached building to the southern elevation of the site. The reinstatement of public pavement by removal of vehicular crossover, the removal of 1 number of substandard on-street parking bay, and formation of 4 number of replacement on-street parking bays, as well as associated landscaping. The application site comprises a large industrial building, formerly in use as a car repair garage, with a hard surface forecourt in front, located to the south side of Wellesley Avenue, with Dorville Crescent to the east and Paddenswick Road to the west. The site is located within a mixed-use terrace, including residential dwelling houses, and backs onto the rear gardens of adjoining residential properties to the south. The site is located within the Ravenscourt Starch and Green Conservation Area. The image on screen shows the aerial image on site, with the site outlined in red. Again, the wider surrounding area includes a variety of uses as well as varying building typologies. The Curtis building is a prominent 4-storey corner building in this northwestern corner and is mixed use with commercial office and residential above. Paddenswick Court is a 3-storey residential building further along to the west of the site. And there is also traditional housing around the site, varying from 2 stories to 4 stories. The images on screen show the existing site photos with views looking along Wellesley Avenue. The drawings on screen shows the existing site's existing elevation with the existing vehicle repair shop. The drawings on screen show the proposed front and rear elevation of houses 1, 2, and 3. As members will see, the proposed massing and design is in line with the approved scheme at number 14 Wellesley Avenue. That's this building right here, which was granted consent in 2015. The drawings on screen show the proposed front and rear elevations of house number 4, which is a single-story, 2-bedroom house. That's this one right here. The image on screen shows the proposed ground floor plan as well as the private amenity space for each house. So in terms of layout, you have house 1, house 2, house 3, and then there is a sort of a alleyway that leads on to house number 4. The image on screen shows the proposed first floor plan. House number 4, again, as it's a single-story house, you can see that there is a green roof proposed on house number 4. This is the proposed second floor plan. And then this is the proposed roof plan. As members will see, the proposed houses would all have green roofs and solar panels. In terms of energy and sustainability, despite being a minor development, the proposed scheme achieves a 76% reduction in carbon emissions through the use of air source heat pumps and solar PV panels. The image on screen shows the proposed north elevations of the application scheme, as well as the office scheme granted on appeal, and the bottom row outlines the existing elevation. So again, the middle elevation shows the consented office scheme that was granted in appeal based on the 2021 application, and this represents, in terms of the planning history, the fallback position. In a similar vein, this is the proposed east elevation of the application site, and then this is the consented office scheme, and then below you have the existing building. Likewise, this is the proposed southeast elevation of the application scheme. Again, that's on the top row, and then the middle you have the consented office scheme, and then on the bottom row you have the existing building. These are the proposed sections of houses, this is the proposed southeast elevation, again taking you through the consented scheme, the application scheme, and the existing building. And then these are the proposed sections of houses 1, 2, and 3, with house 1, which contains a vertical window on the flank elevation facing numbers 35 and 33 Dorville Crescent. However, this is a non-habitable room window. It serves a hallway, a staircase, effectively. And again, this is the proposed section of house number 3 and house number 4. These two flank elevation windows, again, they serve a hallway. They are non-habitable room windows. This is the proposed section for house number 3 and 4. And again, this shows the outlook from house number 3 and house number 2 and 3, sorry, and it shows that there is no impact in terms of overlooking privacy or outlook given the 18-meter distance and the 60-degree arc. So there is no impact, neighbour immunity to the properties along Dorfield Crescent. So these are the properties along here. In terms of the materials, the proposal would be finished in a high-quality materials, including London stock brick to the rear, white render to the front, and bronze powder-coated window frames, and final details would be secured by condition. The image on screen shows the relationship specifically with number 31 Dorville Crescent. That's this property here. And again, it's a comparison between the application scheme that we have in front of us, and here is house number 4 with its single-story structure, and then this is the consented office scheme, and then this is the relationship as existing with the vehicle repair shop. As members will see, the relationship in terms of the boundary treatment to number 31 Dorville Crescent improves under the application scheme in terms of bulk and massing on the boundary. Similarly, the image on screen shows the relationship with number 33 Dorville Crescent and the boundary treatment as a result of the application scheme in comparison to the consented office scheme is an improvement. Officers consider it to be an improvement. And likewise, this is a relationship with number 35 Dorville Crescent. And again, as members will see, officers consider the proposed application to be an improvement in comparison to the consented office scheme and the existing industrial building. And the same for Paddonswick Court. This image shows the relationship with the three-story flat block of flats, Paddonswick Court. And again, officers consider it to be an improvement under the current scheme as it offers a much better outlook and amenity for these residents. Finally, the image on screen shows the proposed rear elevation under the current scheme. That's the top one here, under the consented office scheme and the existing building. And as members will see, officers consider it to be an improvement in comparison to the consented office scheme. In terms of car parking, the site is located within PTAL 4, which shows a good level of accessibility. However, the application site benefits from a large forecourt, approximately 20 metres in length, and the proposal seeks to remove the two existing vehicular crossovers and reinstate the full curb and footway. This would result in the creation of up to 4 car parking spaces. The application is supported by a transport statement, which demonstrates that there is no net increase in vehicular movement in comparison to the existing unrestricted B2 use. As such, officers consider that the reduction in vehicular trips in comparison to the existing lawful use of the site is a material consideration, which weighs in favour of allowing the homes to benefit from one CPZ permit per property. This would be secured by a legal agreement. The image on screen shows the CGI visual of the proposed scheme. And here you've got the number 14 Wellesley Avenue, which is the consented and implemented residential scheme. And finally, to summarise, in terms of the key issues, these relate to the loss of the B2 Auto Repair Centre and change to residential use. This is considered to be acceptable. Residential use in this sustainable location is supported. In terms of design, the proposed massing is considered to be acceptable. Officers consider the proposal to be a visual improvement to the existing structures on site. And although less than substantial harm on the lower end of the scale is identified to the Ravens Court and Starch Green Conservation Area, officers consider that this has been outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme as detailed in paragraph 11.3 on page 55 of the agenda report. In terms of consultation responses, 18 objections have been received from 10 different addresses, mainly from Dorville Crescent, Wellesley Avenue, Darling Road and Brackenbury Road. These are detailed in paragraph 2.1 of the report on page 28 of the agenda. Some of the concerns have already been addressed, but to summarise, the objections mainly relate to outlook, privacy, the contemporary design and traffic. In terms of design, officers consider that the design aligns with number 14 Wellesley Avenue, and overall there is no cohesive design for Wellesley Avenue. We think it's a mixed-use scheme which is comparable. In terms of the layout, officers consider that the layout has been orientated to mitigate harm to privacy. The windows have been designed to prevent harm to Dorville Crescent, Wellesley Avenue and Paddonswick Court. In terms of daylight sunlight, the proposal is predominantly compliant with BRE standards. There are 2 minor infringements to the no skyline, again detailed in paragraph 7.10 on page 44 of the agenda. However, overall, this is considered to be acceptable. The proposed development would create high-quality accommodation, 4 new homes, 3 of which would be family-sized dwellings. The proposal would achieve on-site carbon reduction of 76% using air source heat pumps and PV panels. In terms of highways, again, 1 car parking permit per house. There would be no objections to this subject to conditions. In terms of SIL, there would be a mayoral SIL of £58,792 and a local SIL of £146,980. And finally, turning to the heads of terms, the proposal would require the applicant to enter into a Section 278 agreement to fund any necessary highway works, and that includes the removal of the crossover on Wellesley Avenue, as well as reinstating the footway. The proposal would also require an equality and demolition management plan compliance monitoring fee of £5,000 and a construction monitoring fee of £5,000. Officers have also secured a financial contribution of £240,000. This would contribute towards public realm improvements, environmental improvements, and the economic development team. And finally, a commitment to meet the council's costs, legal fees, and finally, a limit of 1 car parking permit per approved unit. And for these reasons, officers recommend the application for approval subject to the corrections listed in the addendum and the successful completion of a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. That it's been very helpful. We now move on to speakers, and we have Oliver Jefferson to speak on behalf of the applicant. If you'd like to take a seat and make sure your microphone is on. You have 5 minutes to speak. That's right. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Oliver Jefferson. I'm representing the case as planning agent. We also this evening have the client representative should we have any questions that they can answer. This application for 4 new houses to replace the existing general industrial building has been developed in consultation with neighbours, with the Brackenbury Residents Association and also with the Hammersmith Society. It's clear that residential land use is the preferred use for the site by neighbours and is supported by the Residents Association. This proposal provides an alternative to the extent permission, as you've heard, for a new office building on the site. The homes themselves have been designed to sit within the context of existing residential properties to ensure the amenity of neighbours is respected, and the final scheme has been subject to a number of changes through this consultation process. Pre-application stage, proposals were revised down to 3 townhouses across the frontage and property to the rear, as opposed to 4 across the frontage. This allowed the scale of the terrace to be reduced, including through removal of basements, which will reduce construction impacts for neighbours and reduce the carbon footprint of the scheme. The height of the top mansard storey has been minimised and set back, and the front parapet height has been reduced, again through engagement with the Residents Association. The building footprint itself is substantially less than the existing building and also the extant office building. It includes setbacks along the boundaries with numbers 11 and 13 to either side, and also lowering of the tall boundary walls which are adjacent to neighbours to the rear, therefore delivering amenity benefits. All habitable room windows are more than 18 metres from neighbours. A number of window sizes were reduced in consultation with officers and with the Residents Association in order to avoid any perception of overlooking. The proposals, therefore, will make a positive contribution to the streets. They will repair the frontage gap of the commercial forecourt and the setback existing building. Vehicle movements associated with the residential use will be less than for commercial use, and the footway along the frontage will be reinstated in place of the 2 commercial vehicle crossovers. The architectural design responds to a variety of typologies and scales and materiality along this section of Wellesley Avenue. The proposals are also, as you've heard, of a highly sustainable design with air source heat pumps, photovoltaic cells and high fabric efficiency, enabling substantial reductions in CO2 emissions. The proposals also result in lower embodied carbon and operational carbon impacts compared to the approved scheme. And in closing, the scheme is a well-considered response to the site context. It will deliver new homes which are preferred by neighbours and will make a modest but nevertheless important contribution to housing supply in the borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to take your seat back, thank you. We now move on to committee members' questions to officers. Who has any questions? Ward Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. My first thing I'd like to make is more of a point. I previously at this committee made the point about construction logistics plans and demolition plans. This is not part of the report, which is a problem. I think we need to have an understanding of how this is going to work. If you mentioned the objections this evening, in particular the concerns about transport, this is obviously, as mentioned, a residential site. I made the point before, I'll make it again, we need to have that as part of it when it is a substantial part of the objections. So that's my first point. In terms of the actual questions to yourselves, regarding, I think it's a property for the one further back, are you confident that the landscaping is going to be sufficient to mitigate privacy for that resident themselves when they're moving? Because obviously it's going to be further back and quite overlooked by Paddenswick Court itself. So I want to ask that question.
Thank you. That's your point about construction and demolition is noted and will be actioned going forward. Apologies for that. In terms of the point about house number 4, there is a landscaping condition that they will have to provide details or further details to us on that. But based on the information that we have at this stage, we're satisfied that it has the capacity to achieve a high standard of living accommodation, particularly in this area.
And in terms of the sort of longer term picture, in the maintaining of that, would that fall to the future owners, or would this fall on, for want of a better expression, the freeholder of the site? Has that been established yet?
I'm not quite clear on that, but I would presume that it would be the owner who would take responsibility for the maintenance of their private amenity space.
Yeah, I mean, my main point to raise is that in doing so that this be maintained in perpetuity, if it is in the scenario where it is not being managed by the future owners, that's really the point I wish to make at this point.
I think it would be difficult through planning to enforce that, because ultimately once a person buys a property, it's their responsibility to ensure upkeep. And if there are issues, then I think there are different mechanisms via enforcement that you can, untidy land notice, etc. if it gets really bad. But
my point being, if it's in the event where I'm not sure if it's going to be either freehold or leasehold land in terms of how it's going to be established, but if it is in that event that as part of the estate management, that it be maintained in perpetuity for the benefit of future residents.
I see your point. I'm just trying to think on how we would go about securing that, because we don't know whether it would be a freehold or a leasehold circumstance. It's because they're individual homes. Normally, we would condition management plans for sort of block of flats, and there is an overarching management plan in place. But in cases where they're individual homes that will be sold off individually at different points of time, I think it would be quite difficult to ensure long-term maintenance of private amenity space. Usually, it's communal amenity space that would be secured via management plans.
Okay, I'll leave it with you guys then. No further questions for now.
Matt, you want to come in?
Thank you. Through the chair, Matt Butler, Assistant Director of Development Management. Just to pick up on a couple of points, Councillor Walsh, in terms of the construction logistic plan and demolition logistics plan, it's fairly common practice that these things will be submitted as part of detailed conditions post the application being submitted. I totally appreciate the important points you make around there. They are often concerns from residents living nearby sites that it's going to affect them in a bad way, obviously, in terms of their amenity for the period of construction, indeed, the demolition beforehand. If we do look at this and we discuss it very, very carefully with our colleagues in highways, if we feel that a particular site is of such a nature, for example, a constrained or backland site, and access points are a challenge, we may indeed request more information at that stage, or we feel it's going to struggle for whatever reason to manage that process adequately. We will ask for more information. In this particular instance, we feel that it's something that can be dealt with. The principles of how they outlaid, how they will approach it, a fairly high level during the application phase, we were comfortable with our highway colleagues. So it's not normal practice to request details in advance, and we wouldn't, we're unlikely to do that going forward unless it's a particularly challenging site.
But we have had construction logistics plans at committee before, including, and it's not a million miles away, on Darling Road.
Through the chair, if committee requests to see the details of construction logistic plans coming back to committee, then that's their discretion to do that. It's unusual, but that's obviously committee's discretion to request that they come back. Sorry, just on the other follow-up point through the chair, we wouldn't exercise control on, and it would be very difficult to exercise control over people's private amenity areas. There, as my colleague pointed out, there are other measures and legislation in place to protect if they became, for example, a health problem or a safety issue. But generally speaking, under planning legislation, we couldn't exercise control over private amenity areas.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Pascal Tilbury.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick ones from me. Obviously, this would take place on a garage site. And one of the issues with developing on garage sites is the high possibility of land contamination. What certainty do we have that this is actually good land to develop on, that there are going to be no contamination issues? Because obviously the risk is that we then find ourselves with potentially vacant site.
Thank you. So in terms of land contamination, they have provided a phase 1 desktop study, which has been reviewed, and the council's land contamination officer has, notwithstanding that, has requested full standard 6 conditions for this to ensure that there is no harm to residents of the community.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Moving to residents and the consultation with them. From reading the report, it seems as if the Residents Association is now quite in favour of this development. Could you tell us a little bit more about the process through which we've got there?
Absolutely. So there has been lengthy discussions with the Residents Association, specifically that's the Brackenbury Residents Association. We have had 3 rounds of comments from them, and in their latest comments to us, they removed their objection and are in support of the application. And just to highlight, throughout the consultation period, the Residents Association have always been in principle supportive of the residential scheme. I think it's the residents' wish to see a residential-led development here rather than the consented office scheme. And again, through the presentation, in the comparative images, it's to illustrate the impact that the residential scheme would have in comparison to the consented office scheme. So I think that's been in support. The only matter that they've mainly been concerned about is the sort of contemporary design of the building, which again, Wellesley Avenue, we've said it has a varied typology, but what residents are mostly used to is sort of traditional London stock brick homes. So this might be something different, and it is something different, which we've acknowledged by identifying the less than substantial harm to the conservation area, but again, on the lower end of that scale. And then when that harm is identified, we have to look at what are the public benefits that are being offered to outweigh that harm. And in this case, we think that we've got 4 high quality sustainable homes in a sustainable location, and we have the financial contribution as well as all the monetary fees associated with the development, and we think that that outweighs the harm identified.
Thanks very much. If I may follow up, that's a really interesting point because it brings me on to the question I was going to make, which is about the use of contemporary designed houses in conservation areas. And, we've obviously seen with the number 14 that's been consented to, that's again quite a contemporary design. Now, it's not a case of simply this is put in front of us and we have to say yes or no to it, because there's a huge amount of work that takes place at pre-consultation pre-planning phase. So I wondered if there was a position that we had really on preferring contemporary to more traditional design in these areas, and if so, what the thinking behind that is, because it seems to me again that residents might have preferred a more traditional design.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So just in terms of the...
Sorry, Alan, if you could tell us your title as well. And, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah, just in terms of
you
the...
just introduce yourself. Sorry, that's
Yeah,
fine.
sorry. I'm Martin Jones. I'm Urban Design Heritage Team Leader. In terms of the approach that we take to sites within conservation areas, the NPPF gives us guidance that we shouldn't be refusing contemporary or modern design, de facto, because it isn't in accordance with traditional housing styles. So we do take the approach throughout pre-app discussions to look quite carefully at how contemporary design maybe takes cues and reflects some of the characteristics of the local area. So we will always take that approach to try and ensure that if it is contemporary, there are some elements that give some synergy with conservation area. I think in this instance, this one is quite a unique situation, as you mentioned, because of number 14, but also, as previous planning inspectors have also referenced, there isn't any consistency or kind of, character here that is complete within this stretch of Wellesley Avenue. So again, the approach to taking, a more contemporary approach to the scheme is something that we feel can be supported. And I think, again, just going back to the fallback position that we've referenced in the report of the office scheme, that this although it is contemporary, is slightly more in keeping with the more domestic scale properties in the area, really.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Just a quick one from me about the development having 4 permits for cars, 1 for each flat. I just wanted to ask, because usually we've had it that developments are car-free, and I just hope you could explain to us, why that is not the case here, if the applicant asked for it, just so we know for future reference as well.
Absolutely. So the main thing to stress here is that these are exceptional circumstances, and it's not the council's policy to allow or permit car parking permits. What the applicant has done in this instance is provided a transport statement which demonstrates that in terms of vehicular movements, that the residential scheme results in a lower trip movements in comparison to the existing unrestricted B2 use, as well as in comparison to the consented office scheme. So on balance, it is a careful balance. Officers consider that in this instance, given that there is a substantial forecourt about 20 metres long to the front, which effectively then creates 4 car parking spaces, there is net harm to the existing car parking situation. And in terms of sort of parking stress as well, this area has shown that it's not within stress levels where council would be very concerned about additional impact.
Okay, thank you. And you said it will be just 1 per household.
Absolutely. So the restriction would be for a maximum of 1 car parking permit per household.
And is it only parking stress that would take into account for this, as opposed to environmental impact or any other impact?
So it's not just car parking stress. I mean, in this situation, it's in particular that front forecourt area, the fact that the application itself is creating car parking spaces and effectively adding to the controlled parking zone. So it's not just the parking stress, it's sort of looking at each pieces all together. And in this instance, it balanced in favour of allowing the 1 car parking permit. And then in context of that, these are substantially large. I mean, if you looked at the space standards, they far exceed the space standards. 2 of them are 6-bedroom, 1 of them is a 4-bed, and then the smaller one you have a 2-bed. So they're large, exceptional homes. Again, we've made this difficult decision, but I think in terms of what the characteristics of this application and this site are, it warrants us to be flexible in this regard.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to come in. Okay, very good. In that case, we can move to voting. First, on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed. Recommendation 1 is on screen and in our packs. Members, please can you confirm if you're voting for, against, or not voting? Councillor Borland.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Tilbury. For. Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Nemo.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
And I will also be voting for. And now moving on to recommendation 2 on the report. Councillor Borland, are you voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Pascal-Tilbury. For. Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Nemo.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
And I will also be voting for. Thank you very much. That means the recommendations are both agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 5, which is Hazel House on Salgrave Road, W67QF. Neil, when you're ready, we can begin. I should say you will have noticed that items 5, 6, 7, and 8 refer to essentially the same properties, the same group of properties. So Neil, in your presentation, I understand you'll be covering all 4 extensions, and then we'll take 4 separate votes at the end.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this presentation involves Hazel House, Royston House, Suffolk and Norfolk houses on Solgrave Road. These are each application is for the erection of a rear roof extension involving an increase in the ridge height by 300 millimetres in connection with creating a new self-contained studio flat on each of the 4 blocks, as well as alterations to the roof of the back addition to create a small flat roof and terrace with screening around it. If you look at the site location plan, you can see the 4 sites outlined in red: Norfolk, Suffolk, Royston, and then Hazel to the north end. the Percy House, Eric House, Holcomb, and Irene, which are highlighted in green, they already have existing. They've already developed with the same very similar scheme. Burnham House, there in yellow, between Irene and Holcomb, was at the committee in March this year, which some of you may remember were resolution with the grant permission subject to the legal agreement with regards to car parking. And then Myrtle House and Home House have got existing or had planning permission. I think the Home House one has just expired. Myrtle House is still valid. And Hazel House, which is one of the sites here, did get permission in 2021 on appeal for the same development. This was not implemented within the 3-year period, therefore they've had to apply again. Showing the image here, you can see the 4 sites are marked in red, and then you can see Irene House here, number 100, got the rear roof extension. Burnham, say consent authorised subject to the legal agreement, and then Holcomb and Derrick houses here, which have the rear roof extension with the with the small terrace on the back addition, and then at the very left of the picture, you have Percy House, which has the rear roof extension that was approved in 2015. I mean, rear roof extensions are a very common feature within the street. You can see on the opposite side of the road, for example, there's a significant number of rear roof extensions that have been built. And officers consider this to be in keeping with the existing character and appearance of the area. Just show the layout. I mean, this is generally the layout for 3 of the 4 sites. You have the ground floor with a flat, 2 flats, first floor with 2 flats, the next floor with 2 flats, and then the studio you propose would be here at roof level across the width of the building with a small terrace behind. There'd be conditions requiring enhanced soundproof sound installation between the existing flats, which is generally 5 and 6, and the new proposal. As they're adding additional residential accommodation to the building, they're also creating fire lobbies at first floor and second floor level. As you can see here in red, these are glazed door and windows to wouldn't prevent light getting into the existing landings. The width of the existing landings would remain the same, although the depth would reduce somewhat. These have been discussed with the council's fire safety and means of escape officer, who considers it is part of the requirement of the building regulations to improve fire safety of properties, and they consider that what has been proposed is acceptable in terms of accessibility. It would still leave a sufficiently deep lobby that people can carry good furniture in and out and can manoeuvre around the building. Just the proposed rear elevation, you can see the terraces set within the pitched roof. The pitch remains to the rear, and it would only really provide space really for around about couple of people to stand at the most. There'll be obscurely glazed screens to 1.7 metres high, to prevent overlooking and loss of privacy. Cycle storage for the new unit will be provided in the cupboard under the stairs, which is what has been accepted at other sites within Solgrave Road, and certainly on the appeals where the planning inspector considered these matters, they were satisfied with the cycle storage there, and an additional bin can be provided in the front garden for the refuse for the site. This particular floor plan is actually from Hazel House, which, because on the corner, has got a slightly angled footprint. The other buildings are much more traditional, flat fronted, but there's no, it just means Hazel House are lucky that the existing flats are slightly larger in that respect, but the proposed roof level is the same. So officers recommended approval for the sport application, subject to the satisfactory legal agreement, which would prevent the new occupiers from being entitled to an on-street car parking permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We have no speakers, so we move straight to members of the committee. Do we have any questions? Councillor Walsh.
Less of a question, more of a statement. I know this has come to committee before, and obviously, as you say, it's been granted. And on this street as well, there is several roof extensions. This seems entirely in keeping with what's been developed in the existing area. It's added housing in the borough, and it seems considered. So I can't see a particular issue with this application.
Thank you, and I agree with this statement. This is also my feeling. Anyone else? Questions, statements, feelings? Councillor Boland.
I agree with any particular issues. I just more of a question on. I know that we need more housing in the borough, but the square footage of those studios, like I understand that it's been previously approved for other sites. But what's your kind of opinion on? We want good quality housing, and to me that looks very small. And I just wondered what your opinion was on sizes of studios and studio flats, kind of as a whole.
They are small units. They are studio flats. So effectively, one person really. There's a need for a wide range of accommodation. In the past, previous applications on that street, we have tried to refuse permission based on that we felt it wasn't satisfactory level of satisfactory quality accommodation. That has been used a couple of times. The planning inspectors have never agreed with us and considered that it provided an adequate size for what it is, and that it would provide reasonable quality of accommodation. It's at a high level. They get good lighting in there, etc. Yes, you wouldn't want to have 3 or 4 people trying to stay in it, and I don't think anybody really rationally would. But we have a need for a range of property sizes within the borough, and I think without any if you tried to make those large, it would have a greater impact on the appearance, come out into the back addition, and would have possibly a harmful effect then on the character appearance of the existing buildings.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? In that case, we will move on to voting. First, whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and members can say if they're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Borland?
For.
Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury? For. Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Nemo?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
And I will also be voting for. And now on to recommendation 2. Councillor Borland?
For.
Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Nemo?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
And I will also be voting for. This means that item number 5, which is Hazel House, both recommendations have been approved. We move on to voting for item number 6, which is Royston House. On recommendation 1, Councillor Borland?
For.
Councillor Pascal Tilbury. 4. Councillor Walsh. 4. Councillor Nemo. 4. Councillor Melton. 4. And I'm also voting for. On recommendation 2, for the same item, Councillor Borland. 4. Councillor Pascal Tilbury. 4. Councillor Walsh. 4. Councillor Nemo. 4. Councillor Melton. 4. And I'm also voting for. Therefore, both recommendations have been carried and the item is approved. Item number 7 is Suffolk House. And we move on to recommendation 1, Councillor Melton. 4. Councillor Nemo. 4. Councillor Walsh. 4. Councillor Pascal Tilbury. 4. Councillor Borland. 4. And I'm also voting for. Recommendation 2 of item 7, Councillor Melton. 4. Councillor Nemo. 4. Councillor Walsh. 4. Councillor Pascal Tilbury. 4. Councillor Borland. 4. And I'm also voting for, and therefore the item is approved. And last but certainly not least, item number 8, which is Norfolk House. Recommendation 1, Councillor Melton. 4. Councillor Nemo. 4. Councillor Walsh. 4. Councillor Pascal Tilbury. 4. Councillor Borland. 4. And I'm also voting for. And on recommendation 2 for the same item, Councillor Melton. 4. Councillor Nemo. 4. Councillor Walsh. 4. Councillor Pascal Tilbury. 4. Councillor Borland. 4. And I'm also voting for. Thank you all very much. This item, as well as the other 3 ones, are all approved. Thank you very much. We will now move on to item number 9, which is 517 to 523 Fulham Road, SW6 1HD. Roy will be the presenting officer. We'll just give you a couple of minutes, unless you're ready already.
Good to go. Thank you.
Perfect. Let's go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to a site at 517 to 523 Fulham Road. The application involves the conversion of the existing building, which is a vacant former college annex, and its use as a mixed-use Class E basement ground floor with flats above, 7 flats, and there are various alterations, including the removal of an unsightly fire escape at the rear, which is no longer required because it was associated with the school use. There's also the formation of a roof terrace at roof level, some rear extensions, which also involve some new balconies at the rear, the installation of some air source heat pumps, doors and roller shutters, etc., etc., and a new front entrance for the residential use, as well as a new security gate providing access to the rear for cycle parking and bin stalls. As you can see from the image on site, the image on the left highlights the location within the conservation area. The conservation area is highlighted in green. It's the Moor Park Conservation Area. The site is highlighted in red. The darker green colours are what we call local buildings of merit and for their architectural merits, etc. And those are highlighted. And you can see there's one to the left on the image, which is towards the west in terms of location. And then opposite the site, you've got these Oswald's Foundation, Oswald Store buildings, which are a listed building. And slightly to the sort of northeast is the Chelsea Football Club on the, you can see the axis, which is sort of where all the index is located. In the bottom right, you've got the highlighted in dotted line is the outline of the Fulham regeneration area and the Fulham town centre. And you can see the site highlighted in red, which it falls just outside of the town centre boundary. This is just showing you 2 aerial shots. One on the left, you can see the building in question, which is highlighted by the red dot. It's the ground floor frontage, which is intended for commercial use for the basement, and then upper floors. And then either side of that, you've got a pub on the left-hand side, which is a 3-storey building. And to the right of that, you've got a residential development. To the rear, you've got a very high wall, which is about 7.5 meters, 8 meters, and beyond that is a car park and some red, which shows some residential. And the building sort of to the northeast, that sort of orange browny colour, is an office block. So sort of a mixed character. And then you can see the image on the right hand side. That's the St Oswald Store Foundation building, which is accommodation for ex-army, I believe, citizens, but it's accommodation which is in flatted use. And then you can see an image, a sign which says car park. That is actually the edge of the town centre, which leads into the Fulham shopping centre. And then the image in the middle is the site in question, which shows the so the ground floor and the several stories above, and then on the right-hand side of that is the residential use. This is just some images from the rear on the top left, and you can see that unsightly staircase, and then you can see the other half of the rear on the bottom left. And then the images on the right-hand side just show the internal layout of the building, which is, as you can see, vacant, and you can see the staircase which runs down to the lower ground floor level. This is just trying to show what the building would look like from any sort of public vantage points. So you've got 3 different views and then the map on the bottom. So if you fan out from the map on the bottom, the Waterford Road is on the left-hand side. And if you were to look through this gap in Waterford Road, between number 531 and Waterford House, you would see these several sort of fire escape staircases. And what's highlighted there is the image in red of the proposed extension, which is about sort of 3 meters deep, basically. So it's not that deep. And then the middle image is what you would see from the street along Fulham Road. You can see the area highlighted in orange, so that's where the location of the roof extension would be. That's the only part of the building which would be visible from Fulham Road because of the location of the proposed works on that side of the building. So for the most part, retaining the existing building. And then the image on the right-hand side, you can barely make out. If my cursor will work, maybe not. So there's a 3-story building in the foreground, and just to the right of that 3-story building, there is an orange, an area building highlighted in orange, which again is just the rear elevation of the proposed development, which again, it's only 3 meters deep. It's sort of 9 square meters, so you barely see it. So just giving you this context because the site is in a conservation area. So this is spot the difference. On the left-hand side is the existing elevation, which shows the flank elevation with several windows, and then a middle bit where there is a blank elevation. And then the stairs are on the left-hand side. And then what's proposed as a replacement, you will have an infill extension, which is essentially 9 square meters all the way down from top to bottom almost. But there's an element here. At this point, there's an undercroft. So this is where the actual development would stop in terms of extension. There would then be an extension on top of that. But this area here where these steps are and the stairs that go up, that's an undercroft, and that will come out in another image. But these balconies would serve the flats, and similarly these balconies would serve some different flats in that sort of development. This is showing the cross section. So again, just trying to highlight what the difference is between the changes. So on the left-hand side, you can see the existing building with those steps that run down to the bottom. And on the right-hand side, you can see the proposed extension, which is sort of providing additional floor space for the internal areas to these flats on the upper floors. And then beyond that, you can see these highlighted areas, which are sort of grille looking, but they are actually balconies, about 1.5 meters deep. And then this red line denotes the sort of undercroft area from the rear of the site. So you can see these steps that go up to the ground floor, and then you'd come out the side of the building to come onto the Fulham Road. This is again just trying to highlight this fire escape staircase, which is being removed. So you can see the footprint of it on the left-hand side from at roof level. So essentially, it says that the extension would replace that. So the area on the right-hand side is the sort of internalised floor space that would be added to the flats. In this case, that would actually be a roof terrace, but on the floors below, it would be internalised floor space. One thing to note here is that the projection of the fire escape staircase is slightly beyond the rear, if you like, what I could describe as a back addition in this case, whereas the proposed extension would line up with the back addition, so the footprint of it is actually reduced. So turning to the front elevation, not again much change. So on the left-hand side, you've got the floor area of existing with, say, annex to a former college. And the significant thing here is that this shop front area here, which is highlighted here, it would have a new door introduced to provide access to residential accommodation on the upper floors. So you can see in this location on this map on the right-hand side, that would be that access door. And then you've got a residential entrance, and then there is circulation areas to go to the upper floors, but the area highlighted in green would be the Class E use. This is a typical floor plan. So on the left-hand side, you've got 2 flats on the 2nd floor. On the right-hand side, you've got a single flat on the 4th floor, and the sort of areas highlighted in sort of light green are those areas which are terrace or balcony areas. So again, this is really just to kind of indicate the sort of accessibility and the quality of the accommodations. There are 7 flats, 1 and 2 bed. All of them exceed the space standards, minimum standards, and that's highlighted in the report, paragraph 5.2. There is also improved accessibility to these flats because you can go from the internal areas to a centralized lift location, and that means that you get access to the upper floors for wheelchair users. And also in this particular case, on this third floor unit is the accessible unit, and you can see that there is sufficient turning space and layout for the use of that accommodation. Now just any sort of residential amenity in general, so I'm trying to sort of break it up into different parts. So on the western part of the site, you have this 2nd floor terrace at the rear to the building at the frontage, and there's a flank wall on this side which contains no windows, and there's a flank wall from the existing side which contains no windows. So the only sort of views you'd get would be from this patio door at roof level, which is at 2nd floor at number 525. So looking at the footprint, if you recall, the fire escape would be removed, and it's basically not shown in this image. I'm not sure why I didn't pick it up on Google, but essentially it's in this sort of area here. And the view to that new extension, which would obviously be brick with a roof cap on top, given the juxtaposition, the extension would only be visible, wouldn't actually be visible at all except from a very oblique angle. There are no opposing windows in either of those elevations to that nearest window. So there's no overlooking, there's no impact in terms of daylight and sunlight. It complies with the BRE guidance. And subject to satisfactory conditions, there's no issues regarding noise. So to the west, we feel that there is no undue harm in terms of residential amenity. Similarly to the south, you've got this high wall here, which tends to amount to 2 stories. It's basically about 8 meters high, and beyond that you've got these residential and this building here, which they don't have any residential gardens, but they do have a forecourt which is for cars, etc., and that's historic. But there are no habitable rooms significantly in this elevation facing the site. And similarly beyond that, you've got these offices at Waterford House, which the current use is as offices. There are no habitable rooms to the south. So in terms of outlook, there's no harm. There's no harm in terms of privacy, no harm in terms of daylight and sunlight, no harm in terms of noise. And then we turn then to the east, and looking to the east, if you recall, the extension is in this corner of the site with some balconies at upper floor levels. And there are notably some windows in the pub, which is here on the corner, and one in the flank elevation, which is seen on the image below. But none of these are habitable rooms which face the actual application site. Indeed, the one that's at the bottom serves an office, and the ones which are in the main rear elevation look outward and away from the proposed alterations and extensions. And so for that reason, we feel there'll be no harm in terms of outlook or privacy or daylight and sunlight or noise, etc., particularly as these extensions are balconies and roof terraces quite modest in size. And then just turning to some highways matters, you've got the PTAL, the location of the site is PTAL 6A, which is excellent, which is the best it can be, because it's close to the town centre. In fact, it's 2 minutes from Fulham Broadway. It's car free. There are 17 cycle parking spaces in the basement and at ground floor in various places, and there's provision for refuse storage in various locations for both the commercial and the residential use. And then in summary, in principle, we consider proposed use as acceptable. The loss of community use has been explored for alternative uses with marketing, no takers. So in principle, the loss of the community use is accepted. The proposed mixed use of commercial and residential is accepted, and we feel that the use of the ground floor with a commercial use help to activate the frontage along Fulham Road, which is quite dead in this location at this point. And then you've got the 7 residential units, which are all additional units which add to our housing supply. In terms of design, the alterations are quite modest, largely towards the rear of the building, and we think that these extensions are sympathetic to the parent building, the conservation area, the listed building, and the buildings of merit. In terms of, I think I've been through this already, but in terms of residential amenity, we're satisfied that there's no harm in terms of neighbours. And then in terms of environmental impact, climate change, this is not a major development, which means that there are certain requirements that we can't ask for because it falls below the threshold. However, the SBD that we have encourages sustainability, and so in this case, the repurposing of the building rather than redevelopment is welcomed. There's less CO2 footprint. There's also 2 air source heat pumps, and air quality measures have been secured by condition, including mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. And as mentioned already, it's in a sustainable location, 2 minutes from the tube, and cycle parking has been proposed, and it's car free. And there's also a Section 106 contribution towards the environmental improvements and to security and to essentially the town centre improvements, public realm. So that's set out in this image here. We've also got a contribution towards the upstream London industrial strategy. So we're recommending that the application be approved. However, I just want to draw members' attention to the addendum, which I neglected to do earlier. In particular, I want to draw members' attention to condition 21. So at the moment, there's a restriction in the addendum at the moment, on the agenda, I think page 171. Yeah, so normally when we look at providing flexibility for Class E uses, we try to make sure that the most sensitive uses don't have an adverse impact on residential amenity of the neighbouring properties. So in this case, potentially to allow the applicant flexibility, there's some concern about the sale of food and drink and the impact of that in terms of impact on neighbours because its proximity to residential above that has been proposed and existing. Similarly for an indoor sports use, which could include a gym, and similarly for a day nursery. Those sort of uses we would normally say is try and encourage another application to get more details. However, to provide more flexibility for the applicants and sort of help them sort of market the site, which has been vacant for some period of time, we feel that we can add additional conditions to safeguard those concerns. So there's a condition which is proposed on the addendum, which seeks to ensure the hours of use for the sale of food and drink are sympathetic to the residential uses. So essentially after 11:30 in the evening, no use again until 7:30 in the morning. And then if there were to be a gym, no classes would be allowed to take place after 9 o'clock in the evening until 7 in the morning. The reason for that is because you can have facilities which are like spin classes, music assisted classes, exercise classes, which can create noise and disturbance above the normal levels of dB background noise. Outside of those activities, the gym could still be open till 11:30 and then open again at 7 in the morning. And then the other use is the day nursery, which again, we've got concerns about, but with these particular hours, we think it could work. So in terms of after school or after nursery activities, at 7:30, we think that's reasonable, but anything before 7:30 would be unreasonable given the location next to the residential, because there'd be lots of people potentially waiting for drop-off and early drop-off and staff arriving, etc. So there are a number of other conditions which have been added, which all again relate to the nature of the uses which have just highlighted. So, for example, no outdoor seating, no live music, no amplified sound, and also, or rather amplified sound to a certain level, and also a condition about odour abatement. So if there's a ducting that's being provided by the the restaurant use, then they would need to provide details to us. And that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for working through the addendum as well. We have a speaker, Mr. Trevelyan, who is the applicant. Mr. Trevelyan, if you have 3 minutes, if you'd like to turn the microphone on, and thank you. Please go ahead.
Well, as the case officer emphasised, this building has been vacant for a long time. In fact, it's been vacant for over 4 years. Previously, it was Chelsea Independent College. We tried to, we marketed it extensively as a school. We then had a revision to planning for a nursery, creche, and latterly for a medical use. Each of those users, I'm afraid we weren't able to obtain. Now, the reason for my comment refers to our, exactly as the case officer recommended, that these uses of food and drink, creche, and gym be allowed. However, I feel the hours that have been proposed will lead us yet again not to find tenants easily. And my only comment this evening is to, on each of the classes, to ask that these hours be relaxed to varying degrees depending on the uses. For example, the food and drink, really we need to be able to be competitive with neighboring sites offering food and drink. We need to be able to offer a breakfast takeaway service from 6 o'clock. Otherwise, we're not competitive, or the tenant will not be competitive with other users. If we go to the gymnasium, for example, there are numerous examples of Anytime Fitness operating in the area, which are 24/7. And we ourselves have gymnasiums with residential above. We're well aware of the problems. It's dealt with by acoustic conditions and also headsets which don't broadcast live music. But even so, I think if we were to accept this, we'd not that it wasn't 24 hours, we'd certainly want it to start at 6 again, because people often exercise before they go to work. And finally, I've just heard that it would be unreasonable, apparently, to allow the creche to commence from 7:30, any time earlier than 7:30. Yet I might remind you that the consent that exists already starts prior to that time. So we want to be able to offer the hours, ideally from not to have it used as a nursery between the hours of 8 o'clock in the evening and 6 o'clock in the morning. That will give us time for the occupiers, time for after school clubs, late pickups, etc. So if the ground floor commercial use is not to be left vacant for another 4 years, we must have slightly more flexibility, please, in the hours. And then we may find a chance of getting a tenant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take your seat back, and we'll consider these comments. We move on to questions from members of the committee, both from what we had from the officers and...
Sorry, could you turn the microphone? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Members of the committee and from what we had from officers and also from the applicant. Who would like to start with questions? Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury.
This is obviously a property next to, I think it's called a pub, but a bar that's been operating there for a long, long time. What are the hours of operation of the pub?
I don't have those to hand, but I suspect that it'll be, around about 11 o'clock. And the hours that are proposed here, perhaps one of the questions you might be leading to, is to 11:30. So if it was comparable with that, we've got our nighttime economy drive to try and allow business to be operating flexibly. So it's in line with that. So yeah, I mean, that's I think I've answered your question.
And just for the sort of benefit of members who might not know the area as well as I do, this backs onto my ward. Could you give us a bit of a description of the activities that take place on Fulham Road in that area between Fulham Broadway Station and Chelsea Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix of uses along this part of the world. So you've got the pub on the corner, you've got this residential, so if you see the image on the left, you've got a residential property which is to the right of the development site. So and then the application site itself, if this is approved, would have residential above it. You've got a number of applications which are for changes of use potentially to some of the buildings to the rear to residential. So I would say the area is kind of mixed in character. Yes, you've got the shopping centre opposite, on the opposite side of the road, but I think the sensitivity lies with the neighbouring residential use and the residential use that's proposed above. And the reason why I say this is because we've got other sites in Fulham which have gym uses, and we've had issues with the last few years since lockdown. And the reason for that has obviously been around the hours of starting classes early in the morning. And we've had to sort of navigate all of that and sort of find a compromise. And in many of those situations, the earliest start we found to be reasonable has been, where we've got control, has been this sort of 7:30 start, or 7 o'clock, and 7 is really kind of the maximum we normally allow. Once you go beyond that, what happens is people start arriving, staff arriving, congregating outside. And if you've got families in any of these properties nearby, then they hear the noise. Even if you're not families, you've still got residents above who will hear that noise. And that's not to say that the noise will always cause a nuisance. But having spoken with colleagues in our environmental protection team, they're quite concerned that if we go beyond the hours that she suggested, there would be some issues. And we've had very serious issues on a couple of sites I'm aware of in Fulham where we've had to deal with it through enforcement processes, and we managed to successfully get to an outcome which is satisfactory. But it's been a good learning curve for all of these types of applications, where we're sort of trying to allow some flexibility whilst at the same time recognising that there are residents nearby. So yes, I mean, we're more concerned about the most sensitive uses. So for example, with the gym, as I mentioned already, the spin classes and things like that can cause a noise and can cause transmission through the building even, and some of that is beyond our control. So what we try to do is to put controls in where we can. So yeah, I think that's the context.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up the point from Councillor Pascal-Torborou, just a quick search on Google. I think it's the pub Connor K. And that seems to be open to the early hours, Wednesday through to Saturday, with the earliest closing being at 1:30 a.m. in the morning. So it certainly does seem to be quite a busy commercial street, even late into the evening. My question is perhaps for legal. Obviously, a lot of what's discussed here would be more of a licensing matter than a planning matter. And while one must have regard for the other, for a future use of this premises, would this not more likely fall into the realm of the Licensing Act and what the Licensing Act may provide for this premises?
You're quite right, Councillor. It is they're separate and will be considered separately. However, impact amenity on the amenity of the residents, surrounding residents, and the residents above would be a planning consideration.
So I suppose my question for you is, in terms of our considerations this evening, obviously there is the application before us with certain provisions being made for the hours itself. Obviously, there's the request by the applicant themselves in terms of a slightly more liberal approach to the hours. To what degree do we need to weigh this in terms of its actual practical enforcement? As you say, is our concern about the practical or the effects on the residents, or is this about how this may actually, when it comes to a future licensing application? Because I think we seem to be crossing realms here quite a bit.
You don't need to worry about the licensing impact, or how licensing would consider this application. For example, if licensing imposed longer hours, so let's say it allowed them to be open for a much longer period, and planning considered the impact on the amenity of the residents and restricted it to, let's say 7 o'clock, it would be 7 o'clock that would apply, because they're separate, they're distinct areas, and they will be dealt with separately, and there shouldn't be any overlap. And if there is different hours applying, the more restrictive or the more stringent condition would apply. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I suppose it does. And in essence, what I'd be proposing is that we would allow for the matter of hours and restrictions to be left to the licensing committee rather than it be applied for through the planning.
No, it is a planning matter because the officers would have to take into consideration the impact this would have on the existing residential units in the area, as well as the proposed residential units above the commercial use. So that is a material planning consideration, and officers would have to take that into consideration.
Certainly, thank you.
And if I may follow up on that, if let's say this was, the new condition 21 was not there, would it mean that whether to be a new tenant, they would have to go through licensing and they would then consider the specific house? It doesn't mean that it's free for all and they can stay open forever.
Well, licensing would only apply to certain users, not to all types of users that are being proposed here.
Sorry, through the chair, may help. A key consideration here has been experience, and not too far away from here, we had a situation where we had a gym operating and we had residential above, and it wasn't purpose built in that way. It was the residential was either introduced afterwards or the gym use afterwards. I can't quite remember which way around, but the problem we had, and we totally sympathise with the operator, and this has been vacant, the applicant, and this has been vacant for a number of years. We understand the pressures they have. The problem we have is particularly when you're changing the use of something and it's not purpose built for that mixed use and that tension potentially of residential above, particularly a gym use. And we're focusing on gym use here because that was the issue we were dealing with not far from this site. And the issue we have, while there's other legislation that can protect residents, such as environmental health legislation, there's noise, nuisance can be, and those thresholds can be crossed. In this particular instance, there wasn't any statutory nuisance and certain thresholds weren't being crossed, but there was clearly, in our view, significant harm to the amenity of the residents above from a constant, in this instance, it was a vibration, a constant bass beat that was travelling largely, we think, through the pipework in the housing, and the acoustic sound installation they'd installed retrospectively was not dealing with that issue. So this is where we're concerned, is when you have things that are not purpose built for these particular dual uses next to each other, and and with all the will in the world, the environmental legislation may not protect people's amenity, and furthermore, retrofitting may not essentially be able to mitigate the impact.
Thank you, man. I'm sorry, Mr. Trevelyan, there isn't the option for the applicant to come back, but thank you. No, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Trevelyan, it can't be interaction. Thank you. That's okay, appreciate it. Yes, Councillor Borland.
I'm not sure this is a question for legal. I'm just I'm unsure what we're actually voting on here, because we've got the addition, and then the applicant's obviously asked for us to show leniency to that addition, which already has leniency compared to what was initially put in front of us. So are we being asked to vote on the addition, and we're kind of discounting the comments of the applicant this evening?
So the application is as the officer presented it for the change of use with conditions that the officer has recommended. What the applicant is asking for is some leniency on those conditions. So he's in fact asking for a slight variation to those conditions. So which is, I mean, if you take the view that what the applicant is proposing is reasonable and should be permitted, then one of the councillors would have to propose a motion to vary the condition, and then it would have to be seconded, and you would have to take a vote on that.
So we're essentially voting on the application as per the addendum. I don't know if you have a copy, and if someone wants to provide another amendment, then we'll vote on that. If that's okay. Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury.
Very much. Have the issues that have been had elsewhere with the gym being loud, is that where there were already residents living above in the premises? Because I guess one of the considerations here is that this is going to be converted ready for people to move in. And when they move in, they do so in the knowledge of the circumstances. And I'd guess that if you want a quiet life, Fulham Road is not necessarily the place that you choose.
Through Through the chair. There is obviously the potential that residents would move in and the use would come in post them taking occupation. My colleague Roy can answer the specific question, Councillor, you asked first off. I would just quickly add, it may be helpful following from Councillor Borland's question, that if committee were to grant permission tonight as per the recommendation and the addendum, there's always the option for any applicant to submit an application to vary a condition. At that stage, the applicant could then submit full details on how they would mitigate from a potential gym use at earlier hours and so forth.
Yeah, just to add to what Matt said, I mean, this application, there is, as far as we know, it's a flexible use. So it's kind of open-ended. There's no end user in mind at the moment in time. And for that reason, we put these conditions on. If an applicant came in with a bit more detail and there was an end user, they could come in with another application, and then we could look at it at that stage in a bit more detail. But just to add to your point, your question, you asked about other uses. You know, some of the uses, I think there's a use on North End Road, which is a gym, which is historic, and there are no conditions on there. But we checked our records, for example, that goes back, predates 2005, so a long time ago. There's some other applications which we've looked at which don't have residential above them, are in commercial buildings, and they are purpose built, and because of that, there's no impact on residential amenity. By contrast, where we've got applications where there is residential or known to be residential, and we've obviously got that information when we're dealing with an application, we have to take that into account. And for that reason, that's why we put these conditions on.
Thank you. Can I just ask, Roy, I think the applicant made a comment saying that the existing consents for the nursery are allowed to stay open earlier than the current condition would do. Could you just, if I misunderstood it, or could you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't have that information to hand, but certainly the hours that we propose are reasonable hours. But just bear with me a second.
Sure.
Through the chair might be helpful. I mean, current extant permission and the current uses are material planning considerations, in the vast majority of cases for us and for to be considered. But ultimately, we have to assess any planning application on the current policy and guidelines at the time we're assessing the application. So to that end, we would apply the guidelines and policy that's currently adopted and seek to apply those restrictions and guidelines.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Pascal-Tilbury, what Roy is looking for.
Thank you very much. I was taken with the idea that obviously there will be a possibility for variation of this down the line. What's your estimation about the time and the cost for that process to take place?
Through the chair. I don't know the cost off the top of my head. It's a statutory fee currently. I think we're talking, if I had to guess, it's less than £500. Apologies, I don't have the figure to hand. And in terms of the time, we're set a statutory target of 8 weeks within which to determine those applications.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions from committee members or any comments or statements? Okay. Thank you very much. In that case, we will move. Roy, I don't know if you have,
Yeah, for this nurseries, it was 7 AM to 7 PM. So that was the hours that were granted back in, Monday to Friday. Sorry, 10 AM to 4 PM on a Saturday. Yeah, so 7 AM to 7 PM Monday to Friday, and then 10 AM to 4 PM on Saturday. And that was back in 2022. So, yeah.
Okay, so.
And that the hours that we're suggesting are very similar. So the difference, I think, is a half an hour difference with the start time for the nursery. That's all.
Okay, and what accounts for the half an hour difference?
Yeah.
No, I mean, why did we decide to do even the half-hour difference?
We consulted with our highways team and we consulted with our environmental protection team, and I understand there's a bus lane outside the site anyway, so that's going to cause problems regardless of people that try to park there. So effectively, I'm not sure that actually starting early is going to make much difference for people arriving by car, but that's one of the key concerns that we had, is that parents will be arriving by car, which is an experience we've had on, again, other sites, and parking and waiting in cars, waiting for pickup, waiting for drop off, and that causes a highways issue. So that's why we suggested 7:30.
Okay, thank you. Anyone any thoughts, or shall we move on to voting? Let's move on to voting then. We are voting on item number 9. We'll move on to recommendation 1 as on the agenda. Members, please let us know whether you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Borland.
For.
Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Nemo.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
And I'll also be voting for. And on recommendation 2, Councillor Borland.
For.
Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Nemo.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
And I'll also be voting for. Therefore, the item is approved. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending, fellow members, speakers and officers. And the draft minutes of the meeting will be published on our website shortly, and they'll be formally approved at our next meeting, which is on the 30th of July. If in the meantime there are any questions, please get in touch with the case officers. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.